Good morning, everyone. This is Melissa Dilling, Instructional Technology TOSA with the Marysville School District. Today we're talking about doing more with data. This is going to be an interactive course where you're going to be asked to use the skills that we are learning today. So please make sure when you're asked to pause and try and then reflect on your skills that you do that in order to advance to the next portion of our video. Let's go ahead and get started right away. And we're going to start off the bat with a reflection question. So what training or experience have you had using spreadsheets or gathering data? And if the answer is very little, that's okay as well. Please put an answer in the reflection box to your right and then hit submit to advance to the next session. All right, so I want you to think back about that last question, the data question, how much interaction you've had. And whether it's a lot or a little, data is very important to the service of student learning. So I personally believe data is one of the most powerful tools to inform, engage, and create opportunities for students along their educational journey. And it is much more than test scores. Data helps us make connections that lead to insights and improvements. So if we can get into that data, even if it is social emotional learning data, we can get to know students through data collection, and then that will help us individualize how we help them succeed. So I would really challenge you today, don't just look at data as something that gives us a score, but something that helps inform and improve their learning. Now, data management and spreadsheeting skills are career ready and they're very desirable. If we look at this chart to the right here, the skill mentioned is Microsoft Excel. Google Sheets is the product that our students and you will have access to. Very, very similar tool. They're both spreadsheeting tools, but it ranks 5th in the top soft skills that employers are looking for. So not only when you learn this skill today, but spreadsheets are fun for students, and there are ways and projects you can do with them that make it easily accessible. And we'll look at those at the end of this training. So keep that student-focused mind. But if you notice from this chart, the only thing above this Excel, we're going to call it Google Sheets spreadsheeting skills, are customer service, writing, organization, and communication. So this really is a skill that as you get better at it, I highly suggest that maybe you consider at least talking to your students about them or showing them data that you have and kind of explaining what it is. So maybe it's not something that they're so worried about later in life when they might be using it for a job. So we're going to take just a quick look at what is the purpose of a spreadsheet for those of us that maybe haven't spent a lot of time. We're going to go into a video produced by Google, and we're looking at a Google Sheet. But again, this is very similar skills. If you were a Microsoft person, someday we can do very similar things with this program. But let's just get our heads around what is this idea of Google Sheets.
Spreadsheets are a common and versatile tool used to present information. You may be familiar with budgeting or project management spreadsheets, but there are many different ways to use them. You might use a spreadsheet to organize information, such as travel expenses or a shopping list. Create a tracker to manage the people and tasks for a project. Or keep a log of grades or assignments in school or sales and invoices in a small business. It's possible to use a pen and paper to record similar information. With a digital spreadsheet, you can easily keep track of a lot of information, analyze, filter, and sort the data, and make difficult calculations quickly. When compiling data for a spreadsheet, you may add the information yourself, take it from an existing document, or use another source. Or you can download data from a computer application or a website directly into a spreadsheet. Many programs will do this for you automatically. Creating a spreadsheet from an app helps you compile large amounts of data, ensure accuracy, and frequently update the spreadsheet when more data is available.
So as our friends at Google mentioned, having a spreadsheet is a really nice way to display information. And you notice the thumbnail here kind of shows that information, and they've done some interesting things here to make the data look more appealing. But we're talking about ways to sort the data. So we're going to work on that as well, because being able to manipulate your data is kind of the step one to actually analyzing that data. So data that you may have as a teacher from student assessments. I'm going to tell you about these tools, and then we're going to pause in just a moment. I'm going to give you time to go and look at the ones that are most relevant to you in your practice. But at least our elementary school teachers for sure are probably using iReady with their students, and also Renaissance or STAR testing. Now, these forms of data go back to what our gentleman from Google was mentioning, that sometimes a program will create a file of data for us. Now, the data that's produced is called a CSV file. So if you're inside iReady or you're inside STAR, they're going to call it a CSV file, which is basically a spreadsheet file. So these links right here are clickable. They're going to show up in the box to the right of your training in just a moment, and they link to a video that explains how to get some data out. So if you use one of these programs, when we pause, I suggest you go and watch iReady and Renaissance, and then maybe try it out and see if you can get some data out. Now, other ways we generate data besides those two assessment programs is that we either generate it for our students or with our students. So Google Sheets was what he was demonstrating. And again, this is what's similar to Microsoft Excel. It is linked to your Google Drive and can be linked to different data for student work. If you've ever used Google Forms will create data. So if you do some sort of survey or a quiz or some sort of exit ticket, Google Forms not only will collect that for you, but it will create a Google Sheet. Now, for the purpose of our training, this link here that says Google Sheets is going to open some sample data that we're going to be using together. So we all have the same spreadsheet to manipulate. And then later, this Google Forms, we're going to be using that as well. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. In the box to the right, you're going to see those 4 links that I just mentioned. iReady and Renaissance, again, this is STAR testing, link to YouTube videos. And then Google Sheets is a sample we're going to be using in this training, as well as Google Forms. So I highly encourage you to pause, go ahead and open and watch whichever one most is relevant to your teaching practice. And then if you could also open these samples before proceeding to the next slides, then you'll be able to stay with us. All right, so hope you had a chance to look at some ways to get data from those videos if you need them, and or you have open the sample that you were given, as well as the sample Google form. And we're going to get to those, so just go ahead and keep those as open tabs on your screen. So I want to just take a moment and talk about this CSV file, or this file that you're getting out of those programs. And it's not just iReady and Renaissance. We get a CSV file out of Flipgrid. We can get it out of many different programs you may use with students. But a CSV file simply stands for comma separated values, which means if you have a string of data, such as a name, a date, a test score, a program is probably putting a comma in between all the different options that you get from a student. And then when you load it into a spreadsheet program, the spreadsheet recognizes the comma, that it should live in its own box. So don't be afraid of the word CSV. It just means that they put a comma in between values or data that was collected, so it can easily be placed in a box. Now, Google Forms makes a spreadsheet for you, and you don't need these separate files that come out of programs. But as I mentioned before, iReady and Renaissance will download a CSV file onto your computer, and then you can open it with Google Sheets. And that was explained in that video. So let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of what it means to manipulate data. You should have already opened this sample data on our last pause. I'm going to open it now, and then we're going to talk about just a few items. And here we go. It's asking me to make a copy. It probably did for you as well. So if we take a look at our data right here, it comes in a little bit hard to read, and it comes in a little bit messy. All right, so we're going to take a moment and learn 5 tools, and then I'm going to ask you to pause and manipulate this data. All right, so first thing we're going to do is talk about the text that we see. Right now, it all is blending together. And up here at the top, you'll notice that you actually have the same text tools that you do if you're in a Google Doc. So one of the things I'd like you to try is manipulating text, and you can do this in several ways. So I can click on a number, and if I change the font or the size, you'll notice it does it all the way across. So that's a nice way to kind of delineate some of your data. So for example, this we call a header. You may want to select row 1 and change the text, and it could be the font, size, color, anything that helps you read the data better. Now, if you wanted to change everything at once, there's a magic button in the top left corner between A and 1. And that is, if I press it, it will select everything on the spreadsheet for infinity. So it goes on and on and on. So if I wanted to change the text for the entire spreadsheet at the same time, that's a simple and easy way to do it. So maybe consider working with text options and definitely try this magic button here to select all. Another thing you might want to try is alignment. So for example, my first name's here. I'll go ahead and change this back to black so you can read it a little better on my screen. My first line here is left justified, meaning it's right along the edge here. But my student ID is right justified. So if I click on a column name, for example, column C, here's my alignment button. I can go up here and decide where would I like it to live. So that can just help you make the data a little more readable and not have all this extra space. Now, you do notice that for student grade, it's cut off. So I have a couple options with that. I can grab between two letters and stretch a column so that now I can see the word. Or I can use something called wrapping, which makes everything fit in the size of the box I have. So I'm going to select column D again, and I'm going to show you wrapping. So wrapping lives over here. So here's alignment, and here's text wrapping. I always think it looks like a little robot face. And right now it's on overflow, which means it's just going to flow behind the box that is next to it. I like this middle one called wrap with the arrow, because it will make sure that your data fits inside the box. And if you select the whole column or the whole row, it will do it to every value. So you won't have to go in and do it to every single one. So that's wrapping. Now, while you're up here, you may have noticed some other tools that may also be of interest to you. This vertical alignment, sometimes you might want your data to live in the middle of a box. So for example, if my row was a little bigger here, that 4 is sitting in the middle. I do have the option to put it at the top or the bottom, and that's just kind of helps you with look. I also have a great text button here that's rotation. So you'll notice the letters are sideways and up and down. Sometimes perhaps I might want the data to be sideways because then I could make these numbers come a little closer together. So I could do it for the whole row at the same time by selecting a number, or I could do it just one box at a time. So I'm going to ask that you go ahead and pause now and try those things that we have looked at. Oh, there's one last one that I'd like to show you, and it's borders. So let me pop back over here. I guess it says 5 tools, but it'll be 6 because we looked at some extra ones here. So the other thing you have is your borders button. So if you would like to have a nice dark border around these top items, you can select that border. You can also select a border to add dark lines here. And then you can change the color and size of your border as well, depending on what you like. So go ahead and give it a pause and come on back here. Make sure that once you try those skills, text, alignment, borders, wrapping, and rotation, make sure to reflect in the box inside of Edpuzzle and say what was easy to complete and what was difficult. And once you hit submit, that will advance the video to the next slide. All right, so hopefully you had a chance to manipulate your data, your text, your alignment, maybe adding some border colors to it. So before we get into actually sorting the data, I want to show you just a couple more tools that may be helpful in the visualization of what's happening. So a lot of times when we get data, not so much from a Google form, but from iReady or Renaissance, you're going to get a lot of data you may not need. Okay, so for my purposes, maybe I just want student name and ID, teacher number, how long it took them to take the assessment, and maybe their overall score and placement. My suggestion for you is not to delete data you don't need, but to hide it. Okay, and hiding data is pretty easy to do. We're just hiding it from view because maybe it's in our way. So let's say I want to get rid of these 4 columns. I select from the top, 2-finger tap if you're using a trackpad, or right click if you're using a mouse, and you want to come down to the word hide. And it'll actually tell you which columns it's going to hide. And if you click that, they're disappeared. And I know they're under there because I get these little black arrows. And if I wanted them to come back, I would select both boxes on either side of those little black arrows, 2-finger tap on a trackpad or right click, and then I get the word unhide, and I could make them come back. So what I'd like you to do is pause for just a moment and hide some data that you no longer need. And I'm going to go ahead and hide a little bit of data while you're doing that. You can go ahead and let the video run, and you'll just be seeing me hide some data. And maybe I don't need any of this end data here, and I'm going to go ahead and hide it. All right. Now, as you're doing that, the other thing you might notice is that we talked about wrapping the text when I selected on an item, but you do have the ability to resize any column that you like. And one of the other options when you were hiding data, when you selected multiple columns, right under hide and unhide was resize. So I can click on that as well. And it'll actually ask me one of two things. Do I want to tell how many pixels wide? So how many dots wide? And right now the default is 100. So I could change that larger. Or I could just say fit to data. And look, it noticed exactly how much space I needed. So I really like that fit to data. That's another nice thing to do besides hiding. Okay, and remember, at any point in time, please feel free to pause and try. I'm not offended because this is self-paced and I won't even know. All right, so one last thing before we sort the data is a lot of times we want things to look a little more visually appealing. So this fill bucket can come in handy from a visual sense. And usually what I recommend is that top column that we have here, excuse me, row, this top row that we have here. I like to fill that in a contrasting color. And sometimes I use a lighter color. You might notice if you use a real dark color, that makes the words stand out, but maybe I lost my text lines. If I go too dark, it can be hard to read or print. So even just a nice light color can be really helpful. Now, another option we have is, I don't know about you, but my eyes aren't young anymore, and it's easier for me to read across when I have alternating colors. So Google Sheets is so smart, it knows that that might be something I want, and you could click on 18 and then change the color, and click on 17 and change the color, or you can select all your data, grab a fill bucket, and come down here to alternating colors. And when I click that, I get some options over here. And in fact, it's even thinking that maybe I needed a header. So if I had selected everything, let me X out of this. If I had selected everything right from the beginning, now I can click through and change it. And I have the option to change all the different colors. Now, again, on mine, I should have not changed this top row. But if I had selected everything and then tried that alternating colors, this would be something that would be an option. But now it's mad at me. So you might want to pause and try not only resizing columns, but also using alternating colors, either adding them yourself or coming in here. So why don't you go ahead and do that? Come on back, give it a pause, and then we'll keep going with sorting. All right, welcome back. You notice that I took a moment and I sorted my data, or excuse me, I color coded my data. So it was a little easier for us to work with here, and hope that you had a chance to do that as well. Let's go ahead and talk about sorting data. So we have a lot of buttons up here that work for us, but I like to go under the actual data button. And under data, we're going to talk about these first three here. So you notice I have selected a cell in column C. It was totally by random. When I do that, or no matter where my cursor is, Google Sheets is assuming that I want to do some sorting with that column. So it's asking, do you want to sort it alphabetically, A to Z, or alphabetically Z to A? I don't actually use these buttons a whole lot because I think I have less control over my data, and I may want to do something a little different. This sort range button is actually the button I use pretty much primarily when sorting data, because I can select it to sort by more than one column. So for example, I could have it sort by last name and then by overall placement to get a class list, and that is done in a range. Now, the reason it's gray is because I've selected one cell, but I haven't selected multiple, excuse me, multiple cells. So if I click out and use my magic button here and go up to sort, now notice I have more things that have appeared. So it's asking, do I want to do the whole sheet? Do I want to use a range? I just go right past all those and I go to sort range. And now I can kind of decide what comes first. So first thing to think about is most of the time your data has a header, which means these titles. Right now when I'm sorting, I just have column letters, which is fine. But if I click this box, watch what happens. Now it looks at the names of those things and it puts them here, even the hidden columns. So you can still sort by things that are hidden. So let's say I'm looking at my data from students and I want them sorted first by their overall placement, their overall relative, or their overall score would be fine. So I have to kind of look in the list. The only thing I don't like is that it cuts it off here. So this overall score, scale score is fine. And I'm going to say A to Z, which will also do it in numbers, greatest to least. Then I can add another column. So first it's going to sort all the data in numerical order. And then I probably, oh, now we can see it a little better. Now I probably want it by last name. And let's say these students were in a bunch of different classes, and maybe we were working together with other teachers and we were going to sort kids into different rooms by who could be helpful. I might also need to know their teacher, like their class number. I took out names and just put numbers in. So these numbers might represent a teacher name. I have them in the order of 3. And notice if I make a mistake, I could delete those. So now I'm sorting by 3 things in the overall, the order I put them in. And what you see here is first, we sorted by placement. Second, we sorted by last name. And then we sorted by teacher name. Now, if you don't like the way it's sorted, or maybe you want it in a different order, you can hold down your command key on a Mac, or control if you're using like a Chromebook, and then the letter Z. That's the undo button. It's also right here. And notice it gives you the shortcut. So I'm going to undo that sort. And sometimes you just have to play around with it to see, is it sorting the way that I wanted it to? So maybe I should have probably done it by last name and then by that score. So what I'm going to ask you to do is pause this video. Now I have it sorted by last name in here. I took the student last names out. So now I kind of have a class list, and then I also have their score. Okay. Maybe another time I want to sort by the duration. So how long it took them to take the test itself. Maybe that tells me how much they rushed. So I could do duration, and then I could do last name. You can come in here and sort the data as much as you like. But if you look at these numbers here, you notice that Delaney took the most time on her exam, and she ended up at a grade level 1 below. So maybe she was struggling a little more, right? And then here, this person only took 24 minutes, and they're also 1 grade level below, but they went a little bit quicker. So that's just good data to think about. Was it because they were struggling? Was it because they were distracted? Were they trying to hurry to get done with something else? So your job is to go ahead and see if you can manipulate some of that practice data. I would try sorting. I would also try to undo and resort by different ways and different headers. So different things first, maybe first name first and teacher name, and see if you can get familiar. Then come on back here and we'll do some more work. All right, so you just practiced sorting your data, but now we're going to talk about something called conditional formatting. So let's just talk a little bit about what conditional formatting is. It sounds fancy. It's another way to visualize your data so you can easily choose areas for intervention would be the best way to describe it. So conditional formatting is adding formatting to a spreadsheet under certain rules or conditions. And by formatting, format just means to fix. So by formatting, we mean things like color, font, underline, bold. So Google Sheets will go and sort through your data and kind of highlight those areas. So if you have thousands of spots of data, it can go find things for you so that it will save you a lot of time rather than having to read every line. I do have some step-by-step directions that I'll include as a note. So you may see that pop up. You can open that and take a look. But conditional formatting, if you look at this image here, allows you to have colors show up in different boxes, as well as changing, like I said, font and the such. Now, the word conditional formatting, it actually lives in 2 places, but the main thing you want to know is that since format means fix, all the things under formatting, including conditional formatting, which I've highlighted in red here, do show up under that tab in Google Sheets. So I'm going to go ahead and pop over there and show you live. But a lot of the things I look for as a teacher is specific text. So when the text is example, let's say all my level 1 readers, that might be a time when I'm like, I want to pick out of this huge spreadsheet all my level 1 readers. That would be considered certain text that I'm looking for. But when we do this, we can also go look for data that is like greater than or less than. So for example, if you have a target number of a score that you wanted on a certain assessment, you could highlight students that maybe had less than 450 on a Lexile score, and then it will come and help you find where those appear in your data. The other thing that it can look for is things that are equal. So you can either use words or numbers, but we can set some rules to go look for something that is equal to something else. So don't worry if that doesn't totally make sense yet. I want you to watch me, and then you're going to pause and take some time to practice. So conditional formatting, it does live in 2 places, as I mentioned. I usually just go to format because format means fix, and I can remember that. And I come all the way down here, and conditional formatting lives right here. I also have the ability to clear formatting. So that could be like colors and fonts, anything I've added. That's a nice way to clear things. So that word appears here. It also appears magically. In fact, it didn't used to be here, but it is now. If I select everything, the word conditional formatting does live under fill because essentially we're filling colors. So I'm going to go the long way that I've always gone because it makes me comfortable, but I just wanted you to know if you saw it, it is the same thing. So at the moment, I have 1 cell selected. So if I choose conditional formatting, that 1 cell has a name, P21. Okay, that's how it got that name. For those of you that play Battleship, if you're ever explaining this to students, it's much like the game of Battleship. In fact, if you play Battleship first, then it will make much more sense to them. So right now, if I were to create a rule for this, it would only apply to P21. And that's something to double check because I think you probably want your rule to actually apply to your data, all of it. So I'm going to hit cancel. Instead, I'm going to come over here and remember that magic button that selects everything. I like that one better. especially when there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of text. Now, all we need to do is create a rule. So I'm going to hit the plus button. And you're going to see things happen, but don't worry. Okay. Right now it says from A1, so this very first box, to the end of time, M33, 334. If a cell is not empty, meaning if there's something in the cell, it's going to turn green. Well, that's probably not helpful for test data though, right? So let's say I'm looking for a certain overall placement. So remember I said that one thing I use a lot is text is exactly. Text is exactly. So text is exactly, and I want to know where my level 1 readers are, because then I can pull them into a group and I can go and see them and I can look at their scores. So, and maybe I want that green, or maybe I want that red, because maybe that is a area of concern for me. Okay, so no matter how the data is sorted, it should give you a preview here. My level 1 readers are Emma and Linus, Patricia and Aaron. Again, I could pull them out and give them some intervention. I can add another rule right from here. So I just click add another rule. Actually, it's going to make me say done. I created it 3 times. Let me get rid of that. Okay. Notice I did just hit that little trash can. So text is exactly, that was one of our choices. Now, another one of our choices I said I use a lot. You can use any of these. Play around with them and have fun. But I like to use less than and greater than, or greater than and equal to, or less than or equal to. This really helps me, especially when I'm getting scores out of something. So I'm going to choose less than or equal to, and I'm going to write 450. Now, unfortunately, notice there's, besides overall score, there's a lot of things coming up that are under the number 450. So maybe I'm going to cancel out of this rule. Maybe I don't want to select all the text on that rule. Remember before this was everything. Maybe I just want this column, and then I'm going to add a rule. So notice I grabbed just this column, add a rule, and now my range is different. It's just saying it's all the things in O, that's probably more helpful. So greater, let's do less than or equal to. Probably in assessments, that might be something I would care about more. And then I can say done. So now I can see my level 1 readers. I can also just see who scored greater than or equal to. All right. So those are 2 choices. I can select just a column, or I can select all of this, especially if something were to appear more than once. I typically use color as a way to sort my data, but you could do other things as well. So for example, student grade, maybe I just want to highlight where my 3rd graders are. So I could add a rule. Maybe my color, I don't want a color, but maybe I want to just bold and underline. Or I want to change the text color. I could do that as well. And in this case, I don't want it to say is not empty. I would maybe want to say text contains a 3. Like, where are my 3rd graders? And then say done. So conditional formatting is nothing new. You could go in and add your own formatting. I could go in and change this to bold and underline in the text color, but it's saving you time. So now it's a visual representation of your data. You can hone in on those students who need help, look at their scores, look at where my 3rd graders did. So please take a moment with the data. I'd like you to try those 3 things, selecting all of it, find conditional formatting, and see if you can add a rule. Maybe a text is contains or is exactly, or try one I didn't show you and see what happens with your data. You can't break it. You can always select all the data, come in here and delete. Also try to do just a column and try some of those different ideas like color, text, font, and the such. And then come on back here and we'll work together on some additional skills on collecting data. All right, so we were just playing with conditional formatting. I really hope you took me up on the opportunity to give that a try. It does take some practice, but it is excellent for helping you kind of mine the data and look for exactly what you're looking for. We're going to pop over here down at the bottom. So you may not have noticed this, but there are some additional, we call them sheets. They do look like a tab down at the bottom. And if I have multiple areas of data that I wanted to work with, I can create as many different sheets or tabs down here at the bottom, and I can click in between them. All right, so this one I've already done for you. I actually took the data that was here and I deleted some and I cleaned it up a bit so it would just be a little less data. Now, when you have an extra sheet like this, if I ever want to copy the data that I have, I just two-finger lightly tap on my trackpad or right-click if you have a mouse. And I do have some options with these charts. So how I was able to make this tab is I duplicated our first set of results, and then I just started deleting columns. It's also a way to keep a tab nice and clean of your raw data that comes out of like iReady or a testing center or something. You can always duplicate it. Then you have two copies and it actually says copy, and then you can do your manipulating in the copy. So you know that you always have a backup. You can delete extra ones that you make. And you can also change the sheet color to kind of help you highlight what are some different areas. I just think changing colors in any Google product can help visualize it. So I'm actually going to be on sample chart data. I hope you're there as well in that form that we gave you. Now, sometimes I have data. I've cleaned it up a bit. I may need to stretch this column because it just wasn't working for me. Sometimes I might need a chart, maybe to show students, maybe to show my principal, maybe to work with other teachers for us to compare our data. So in this case, I have 17 students, their student grade, how long they took the exam, and their overall score. So there's this really great feature. I'm going to select all my data first. In fact, sometimes I just like the magic button to make sure. And over here on the right, I have a chart. And if I click on chart, Google Sheets is going to take the data that I have and it's going to think about it. Let's try it one more time. It's thinking, maybe I need to get rid of this. Here it comes. I just needed to be patient. Now, it took my students, it took the duration that they had, their overall score, and their student grade. And in this case, it put those in 3 separate columns because maybe I thought they were 3 separate test scores. But it generates this chart for me. Now, if I click on my chart here and I two-finger tap or I right-click, I have the ability to work with this chart and maybe change it. So notice I get an edit tool that comes up and I can resize my chart area. So if I go ahead and click on that, now I get my chart editor will pop up. In fact, that chart editor pops up pretty much no matter what I click on when I'm editing. So here I have the ability to pick a different kind of chart that may show the data better. Usually Google Sheets picks something for you, but there are some that are more visually appealing and I think easier to look at. So if you're, what I suggest doing, the best way to learn all the different functions in chart is to make a chart and then edit the chart with chart editor here. And maybe even see what happens when I click all these different buttons, right? So sometimes I do things that I don't love, Control Z or Command Z on a Mac. And if I hit customize, I have the ability to decide, what do I want the title to be? So it could be 4th grade reading exam. I can add that title. I can change the text of that title, bold. I can also think about kind of the series, how I want things to go. I have so many options here. You could really play with this for an hour if you so choose. I can decide if I want data labels, error bars, trend lines. And if I come down in here, I can even customize like my legend. Do I give this legend here? And then what appears on the axis. So my suggestion is come on in here. Notice that even on that setup, I have the ability, right now I have first name, and it has student grade, duration, and score. If I don't want student grade, it's just guessing, I can remove it. And now I only have two things, duration as compared to overall score. And we can see if there's a trend, how long I spent. This data is much more valuable for discussion because you can make overall kind of assumptions about what's going on in a class and come up with some summary data by looking at a chart. This chart is a picture, okay? And like I said, you can get to some of these other areas here by clicking on them, and it'll take you right there. So it's just kind of a fast way to get there. So this chart is fully copyable, so I could do my copy paste. So let's say control copy. And if I had a Google Sheet, I'll go ahead and open one real fast. Let's just do a new one. I did a Command C on my mouse. Okay, and it was asking if I wanted it to link to the data, and I said yes. And now when I make changes to that data, it's also going to make changes to this chart, but I have this to show staff or students. Okay, so here's your job. You're going to go select all your data. You're going to press that chart button that's in the top row of your spreadsheet, and then you're just going to play with it. See what your data says, see how you can change it, see how you can change colors, and then come on back and explain how you think that chart might help you with your understanding of data. All right, so hopefully you found those charts really useful. We're now going to go talk about Google Forms. I had you open one at the beginning of the course. You'll have another chance to grab it here in just a moment if you close that for some reason. I love Google Forms because I love that it collects data from students and puts it in a spreadsheet. So some of us may not have seen that collaboration between the two and integration. So this is just a quick 2-minute video that's going to demonstrate how that works.
Data can be gathered in a variety of ways from Google Forms. Google Forms can be accessed in two places. First, from your Google Drive, you can hit New and then click on Google Forms, and that will take you to Google Forms, the program. You can also access it from your waffle here, and it will also get you to Google Forms. So I'm going to show you how Google Forms can gather data for you that you can then use to create graphs, charts, and manipulate the data for analyzing. So here's just a sample Google form. I like to use Google Forms as exit tickets. And sometimes I use the same Google form over and over again each day. So I ask a very generic question. For example, what is your answer to the question of the day? That could be posted on your wall, maybe in your classroom. Of course, you could ask quiz questions here, assessment, either formative or summative. There's a variety of things you can do with Google Forms to collect data. Once you've asked some questions here of your students, you do have the plus button, and every time you plus that, you can continue to add a variety of questions. So they don't just have to be short answer like what you've seen here. You notice you also have things like multiple choice, linear scale. You can also have students upload a file if you like them to do that. But my favorite thing about Google Forms is that, number one, it's very easy to share with students. So if I click the send button, I can get a link, and I can share this link either in Clever or Google Classroom, or even email it to my students. Once they start filling out the form, their responses will show up here in the responses section. You'll get a lot of graphs and charts, but you may never have noticed this little green button right here that says Create Spreadsheet. If I click that at any time, I usually do it before I share it with students, but you can do it after. Google is great, and it takes the name, the exact same name of your Google form, and it adds the word responses. You can't quite see it all there, but it does say the word responses. And when I hit create, it's going to actually take me to Google Sheets. Now, Google Sheets is a spreadsheet program, much like Excel, and it's often not utilized as much as it could be, but this is a great way to see your data in a spreadsheet form.
All right, and we talked a little bit about Google Sheets, so obviously you knew that was coming, but I really like Google Forms for that option here. So I'm going to pop ahead to the next question, or the next set of data. So just a reminder that when you open Google Forms and create your questions, you're going to go ahead and ask all of your questions. And then when you're in the response section, there's that little tiny Google Sheets icon. It's almost easy to miss, and that's going to auto populate data. This happens in real time. So your data will pop in. If you had it open when students were filling out a form, Google Sheets is right here. It would actually, you'd see them popping up. So it's updating every 3 seconds as forms are filled out, and new responses will populate at the bottom of the sheet. So the order they come in from students will be the order that the data is in your Google form. So some of you I know have made a Google form, but now when we're thinking about collecting data from students, not just for maybe a quiz, but maybe for other purposes as well, I would love it if you would take a moment, if you've never used a Google form before, and see if you can either create a Google form that you might use in your classroom, or alter the form that I gave you to generate some useful data. So some things to think about would be like a morning check-in. Maybe you want to ask students, how are you feeling today? You could use the exact same form every single day. You could link to it on Clever. You could put it in Google Classroom. Is there an entry or exit ticket? So the one we're going to open is an exit ticket, but is there some way you could get that into your day? Or maybe there's like a student interest surveys of some kind that you want to see what they're interested in for an upcoming project. So if you could work on a Google form, I'll go ahead and put this sample to the right of the screen as a note. It'll pop up. If you need it again, it's the exact same one from before. But come on back here to this screen and then explain what you created and what your purpose was for data collection. So again, here's that Google form. It's probably going to force you to make a copy, which means it will live in your Google Drive. If you don't love the one I have opened, this is actually a template that comes from Google Forms. So you're welcome to alter these questions for your own use. Or you can click on the purple button. And I actually got it here from this template gallery. So you may want to take a moment. Let's say you've made Google Forms before. Come on in here and see if there's a template that you might want to work on, something that might be useful for your school. And again, once you're done, come back to the box in the self-paced course, tell me what you created and how it's going to help you with data collection. All right, so hopefully you had a chance to make a Google form that will actually be useful for you. And I appreciate all your hard work today. I've actually asked you to do quite a bit of work outside of this program. And if you did that, I think it would be very helpful. If you came across anything that was tricky for you, you can email instructional support at marysville.k12.wa.us, or I'm Melissa Dilling, and you can reach out to me and I'm happy to come out and talk with you more about something that maybe didn't quite make sense. But I do want to show 2 quick additional resources, and then you'll just need to fill out the evaluation and attendance form, and you'll be done with this. So if you'd like some additional training for yourself, or if you're upper elementary, middle school, or high school, or for your students, this GCF Global Training, GCF has training on so many things that are computer related. Their mission is to provide free training for people around the world to get better at technology tools we all need. I've linked directly to Google Sheets. So it starts off talking about Google Drive, and then it talks more about spreadsheeting basics. There's also things about formulas. So this can add things up, find averages for you. We haven't gone into that. That will probably be a whole nother training that's coming up. But here's why I like this for students. Formatting cells, we actually spent quite a bit of time here. If you click on one of these, it does pull up more videos. They are fabulously produced, probably better than what we can make here in our short time, but it also has screenshots and directions and even practice assignments at the bottom. So if you scroll all the way down, I know this looks like a lot, but if you scroll all the way down, it actually gives you a challenge with some sample spreadsheets. So for your older students, it might be fun to show them this video. This video contains everything that is in the screenshots. So you'd only have to show the video, and then you could even give them this challenge. It's a great way to teach yourself some issues with Google Sheets as well. So if you just want to get better, fabulous place to come when you have time. So that's GCF Global Training. I'll have these resources on the final slide where your attendance is. So you'll see those pop up with the others. Google Applied Digital Skills is a tutorial program. It can be used for yourself or your students. They can make accounts, but they don't have to. Our video from our friend at Google at the beginning came from one of these lessons. You can actually just take videos out, but you can sort by age range. You can also sort by digital tool. So I have selected Google Sheets, but let's say you wanted your students to learn Google Drawings. You could select Google Drawings, and they have pre-done lessons that are about 45 minutes long. Some of them are much longer because they're meant to be larger projects. These, again, are fabulous. You would not have to assign them to students. If you want a fun project with conditional formatting for yourself or students, they can make art with Google Sheets. I've done this with 6th grade and up, and it's a fabulous fun time, and it makes kids not afraid of spreadsheets. But if I click on it, I just want to show you what's in a lesson, and then you can spend some time exploring if you're interested in helping your students get better at any Google product. So this is making art. If I were to hit start, I would get this first video here, but there are videos that walk along each way. If you'd like students to do a quiz or have extensions for those students that are kind of buzzing through the work pretty quickly, you have that as well. But when I click start, you'll notice I have a nice short video that I could show to the class or for myself, for my own learning. I've done much of my own learning in here in Google Skills. And then it's mostly just videos, and then resources or instructions are here on the side. If you ever want to borrow their video, you can download them and post them other places. If you are worried about them coming into a program, especially maybe elementary where it's too many buttons to click, you could absolutely pull these videos out and download them and put them somewhere else. So just another great Google training section. You'll find fabulous fun projects for kids. It's also fun for you as an adult to learn. So feel free to head over there if you like. So thank you for joining us in this session. To the right of this particular slide, you will see links to the attendance and evaluation. These are very important. It's how you'll get your clock hours. You'll get a copy of them in your email once you fill them out. And then clock hour forms will come later in the year. That's because these courses are all part of a larger section of classes, and we'll probably total up how many you attended. So those will be coming in the spring, but keep the copies of attendance and evaluation, maybe save them or print them when they come in your email. The other thing is, again, I'm going to post off to the side here the links to the GCF Global resources for Google, and then also Google Applied Digital Skills. Thanks so much for joining me today. And again, don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like some additional training. I love meeting with people in person and happy to come to you and talk more about Google Sheets, data, and how it can do more for you. Have a fabulous day.